When we think of Kuwait, the first image that may come to mind is a modern city stretched across the desert. But in reality, the story of Kuwait is one of a much larger transformation that changed the world's economic and energy dynamics, despite its geographical limitations. Sometimes the thing that changes the destiny of a nation is not the size of its land, but what lies beneath it. Kuwait is exactly such an example. Until the mid-20th century, Kuwait's economic life was shaped mainly by maritime trade, pearl diving, and regional trade routes. There was a small but active trading community. But everything began to change with the geological surveys carried out in the late 1930s. Experts identified massive oil reserves beneath the land. On that day, it was not only Kuwait's future that changed, but the destiny of the entire region. In 1946, the first commercial oil export took place. This was Kuwait's first major step into the global energy markets. Oil revenues soon became the primary defining element of the state's economy. A livelihood system built on the sea was now tied to an underground energy resource. And this reserve was no small amount. Today, Kuwait holds around 104 billion barrels of proven oil reserves. This accounts for approximately 10% of the world's known oil reserves. It is not difficult to imagine how such power can transform a nation. However, what makes Kuwait's story interesting is not only the discovery of oil. The real point of attention lies in how this revenue was managed. Because throughout history, many countries have found oil, but not all of them were able to use this resource wisely. Some spent the revenues rapidly, others fell into internal conflict. Kuwait made a strategic decision early on. The state chose to use oil revenues not only to improve the present, but also to secure the future. Therefore, revenues were collected under central management. While a portion was allocated to infrastructure and public services, a significant share was transferred to sovereign funds. This way, both prosperity was ensured and long-term capital accumulation was established. As oil revenues increased consistently, the state's sense of responsibility toward its citizens expanded. Kuwait established a classical welfare state. In this model, the government aims to guarantee its citizens basic living needs. Education, healthcare, and housing became primary focus areas. The state's approach to education was particularly notable. Free access to education was ensured for the population. Over time, literacy rates increased. Many levels of education, including university, were funded by the state. This not only improved living standards but also created a skilled human resource base. Healthcare services were also made free. Modern hospitals were built, and health standards rose significantly. Soon, Kuwait became one of the countries with the highest life expectancy in the region. The state also introduced programs to ease access to housing. Financial support was given to newly married couples. Public housing projects were developed. The aim was to prevent housing from becoming an economic burden. This strengthened social stability. The labor market was shaped by strong state involvement. The public sector expanded, and a large share of employment was provided by the state. Today, a significant portion of Kuwaiti citizens work in government positions, which helps keep unemployment low. However, this structure has also raised long-term questions about economic efficiency. Social policies supporting the family were also part of the welfare model. The state provided financial assistance for marriage and having children. This reduced economic pressure on families and strengthened social cohesion. As a result, living standards rose rapidly. Income levels increased. Consumption habits changed. Modern lifestyles became widespread. Shopping centers, cars, and imported goods became part of daily life. Kuwaitis achieved a standard of living much higher than many other nations. Every strong system carries risks. Since Kuwait's economy is heavily dependent on oil, national revenues became sensitive to global energy market fluctuations. Drops in oil prices created significant impacts on the state budget. This raised questions about long-term sustainability. Aware of this, the government began investing part of the oil revenue through sovereign wealth funds. These funds invest globally in financial assets to generate non-oil income. Thus, even if oil production declines in the future, the economic structure can remain stable. But economic diversification requires more than financial investment. Kuwait also aims to grow sectors like finance, logistics, tourism, and technology. However, this is a long-term effort. Years of comfortable oil-based income slowed private sector development. Large public employment made many citizens dependent on government salaries, limiting private sector growth. Meanwhile, the new generation has higher education and higher expectations. They want a more innovative, productive, and globally integrated economic structure. In short, Kuwait today has a strong welfare system, but it must reduce oil dependency for the future. This will determine the nation's long-term direction. Kuwait's story is a key example of how natural resources, when managed wisely, can transform a nation into prosperity. Oil not only created economic wealth, but also shaped social structures, public policies, lifestyles, and societal expectations. Today, Kuwait has a strong welfare state. But the sustainability of this welfare depends on developing a non-oil economy. Sovereign funds, long-term investments, and new sector development are vital for this. Oil may one day run out, but the real source of wealth sometimes does not come from the ground, but from wise decisions and long-term vision. The strategic choices Kuwait makes today will define its tomorrow.